welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy stupid stuff that people do in marketing and how you cannot do that, but you can instead do smart, not stupid things that are based on good marketing fundamentals that work for you. And who cares if they work for anybody else? I mean, really, this is the thing at the end of the day. I think a lot of times people assume, and we're specifically speaking to startups today, that there's like one magic way to do marketing. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we're going to debunk that myth for you today. There is not one magic way to do marketing, as much as some marketing tech stack might promote to you that it is the one way to make things work. There is not just one way, there is your way. So we're going to explore how you can identify with your way, what you need to know about your way, how you figure that out, how you test those things. And I'm super excited to have my friend Kira as part of the conversation today, because she is specifically an expert when it comes to startup marketing. So there will probably be things we talk about that are relevant for mature companies as well, but specifically we're going to be focusing the conversation today on startups and what startups need to know to make marketing work for them, because there's a lot of nonsense that you can find on the internet, and this will not be nonsense. This will be good stuff. And if you are joining us today, especially if you are a startup founder or you are working on marketing for startups and you have questions or perspectives, insights that you would like to share, please use that fancy dancy little chat box or comment box. I don't know. It's called different things. The place where you type in comments. Use that to ask your question, share your ideas, share your perspective, share your experiences, because it allows us to get even more robust in the conversation. And we super welcome your voices on the show as well. With that, let's learn a little bit more about Kira and why she ended up focusing on helping startups with marketing instead of a lot of other places that people can end up in marketing. So Kira, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you, Tracy. Happy to be here. Happy to join this awesome show. Loved the intro video. So already we're seeing some great marketing to kick the show off. I am Kira Kelsie. I help startups grow and scale with marketing. I'm the preferred expert in residence or preferred service provider for over 20 incubators and accelerators across Canada. I'm also a certified digital marketing expert. So if you are a startup and you're struggling to get traction, call me. I can try and help you. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I caught the startup bug when I was still in university. So I worked through for a couple different startups. And then I just really noticed that there was such a huge gap in the industry. I felt like agencies weren't very sufficient in helping startups grow and scale because they have aggressive pricing models. They have slow turnaround. There's, the person that's doing the work isn't the person you're talking to. So it's hard to really know what's going on. And I just really, I have such a big soft spot in my heart for founders, because I know you're putting your livelihoods on the line for this in an effort to make the world a better place through your product, service, or offering. So I really started Chasm to help entrepreneurs by filling the gaps in their marketing needs and getting them where they need to go.
And this is why the show is called Mind the Marketing Gap. Because I think a lot of times, Kira, there's a kind of like a split decision maybe people feel like they're making, in that they have enough money to invest in marketing resources, and then you're looking at kind of a traditional agency model, or you don't have a budget for marketing and you're bootstrapping, in which case you do a lot of Googling and then maybe are getting not the most useful advice. So what are some of the things that you've really seen are super helpful for startups in filling that gap? Because there's a pretty substantial gap between those two things.
Yes. Yeah. So first, I mean, the first tip I'll give is I actually have a page on my website that has funding broken down provincially and federally. And there's a few that are specified for specific industries, so like ag tech or whatever. But look into funding. So see if you're able to get some government funding. Explore those avenues. Now, don't get trapped in a grant cycle because we want to grow out of that. But grants are really helpful to pay for marketing so that you get into a revenue cycle.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit, because I have worked in companies that have, let's say, failed to scale from startup mode. And I wouldn't say that it's specifically because of getting stuck in the grant cycle, but do you have specific tips for how to like use a grant to create a revenue cycle, or very minimally go into looking at grant funding with that intention that we don't intend to be dependent on this grant funding coming in year over year, but that we're going to use this grant funding to create a revenue engine?
Yes. So one of the things that I always like to, well, I do it when I'm working for founders, but one of the things that I really like to encourage in engaging in marketing, kind of really of any sort, is ask the person to like record what they're doing as they're doing it and focus it around hypothesis testing. So like, yes, I know you want return on ad spend. Yes, I know we're testing different things, but why are we testing it? And what specific business goal is it linked to? So, for example, like if someone just simply writes down what it is they're doing, whether or not the outcome was good or bad, we fail fast and we fail forward. That's something I always like to encourage. Mm-hmm. And if it's not a fail, then absolutely perfect. Then we turn on the tap for things that are winning.
Okay, so let's talk about the business goals for a second, because I feel like there's maybe moving business goals when you're in that startup mode. Like you haven't necessarily figured out precisely what is the right business goal for me. So is this something that marketing can actually help us to identify, is what business goals are meaningful for the business and which we should keep and which we should throw away?
Yeah, 100%. So there's a difference. So there's the company goal. Just wait, I'm trying to center myself. There's the company goal, there's the market, and then there's the offering. And that should look like a Venn diagram, like a triple Venn diagram. And what we're trying to hit is the dead center. So the founder knows what the company wants. The marketer should know the offering and the market. So working together to find that like trifecta where it all is married together, that's where you typically find your gold.
Awesome. And so I think at least in the current startup arena, a lot of the times we're looking at tech, right? We're looking at technical founders, or even if you're talking about ag tech, we're talking about someone who maybe has a specialty in agriculture, not a specialty in marketing. And I know one of the things that I hear quite often is, I don't know anything about marketing. So just tell me what to do. But there's that important part of the Venn diagram that you just talked about, which is the founder and the business goals. And that is something that comes from the company first and foremost, and can be taught or explained or showed to a marketer. But that piece of you is piece of the founder, the piece of the business is very important in making the marketing work. So can you tell us a little bit about that relationship and how the narrative about marketing either empowers or disempowers technical founders?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I do in my process is, I consider the founder to be the expert in their field, right? You have to be. That's why you started your company. You put all your passion, time, money, and effort into this. So what I like to do is, in my process, like obviously it's a discovery meeting and scope, but right after that, I lovingly call it a grilling session, because I want to know everything about your company? Do you have product market fit? Are you sure you know your ICP? Do you what's your onboarding strategy look like? How's your tracking set up? You know, what sales collateral do you have, or do you have salespeople? Is that important? Is the call to action to book a demo, or can it just be a video on your website, right? Like, we're constantly exploring how to make the consumer journey easier in a way that's conducive to how you want to grow your business. Because do you want to really manage a 2,000 sales team as this scales to the next unicorn, or can we just let customers purchase it themselves, right? So also thinking about that sustainability, and ultimately the founder knows that, right? They have the vision.
So let's talk a little bit about this, because I feel like this is one of the misconceptions about marketing, is that it's like this little silo over here that's responsible for ads, and it just does ads and that's what it does. But you touched on a lot of different things there. You talked about onboarding, you talked about sales, you talked about how we're going to honor that, like how we process people coming in as clients, right? Like, can you share a little bit about that kind of reframe, and how marketing isn't just this like little silo over here, but that it's really interwoven with the ways of being of the business?
Totally. So, for example, I always say marketing, if done well, should have tentacles in almost every part of your business. So, a silly example I like to use is, even it comes down to like your executive assistant's email signature. Like, is that branded? Why is that not branded? Like, you know, so yes, it seems minor, but it's not. When you're trying to get awareness, all these things matter. And so making sure that, you know, we know where your company is currently and where they want to go is so important, because, you know, especially like, this is a bit of a hot take, but marketing, specifically digital marketing, the goal is to do enough outbound that you turn into inbound. So first we have to do outbound, and I want us to look great when we get out there, so that when there is inbound, we kind of had our ducks in a row, and then we're converting higher and better, and then it's, you know, the ball that keeps on rolling.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's use this email signature example as an example, because I think this is good. And like, this is something you probably would see, right? With if you Googled something, and like, make sure that all of your email signatures match. But let's talk about the difference between everybody having a branded email signature and that actually being a branded experience. Because again, I think there's a gap here. We'll make all these look the same. And I see it very commonly too on LinkedIn, right? Like, that you create like a company banner and then everybody uses the banner. And that's not bad to do that, but there's a gap between doing that and having a branded experience. So what's, in your definition, what are the differences, and what does it take to go from checking the marketing box of doing things like having email signatures and moving to creating branded experiences?
So I would almost argue that could be more based on HR and hiring. So for example, you know what your brand is. Like, if you want to come across as really friendly and spunky, like, Tracy's your girl, she's awesome, right? And obviously you're great at all types of messaging, but you know, if you want to be like really authoritative and stern, then you probably want someone that comes across that way in an email, and give them a brand guide saying like, no exclamation marks to be used in emails, period. Your sign off needs to be this, like, this is our brand voice, please honor it. And that's hiring, and any founder knows people are your superpower. So founders have, unfortunately, a really hard time, but also a really good time. They have a hard time finding them, but they have a good time when they find a good one.
This is so funny, because I always feel like I follow Good Lawyer on LinkedIn, and I always feel like when I read their posts, they're all like, we are, right? We are not like I am good lawyer or that person, but like we are. And I think you're right. And I think this kind of goes back to what you said about marketing having its tentacles in all of the things, because if HR and leadership and the culture team, I don't think most people have those, and especially as startups. But like when you think about this, and the culture of an organization, especially of a startup, is very heavily driven by the founder. And while it's important for a skills perspective to hire in for skills that you do not have as a founder, having the right team around you that has that same kind of vibe, that even doesn't, I mean, I'm not saying don't have brand guidelines, but like don't really need the brand guidelines to get it, right? Because they're just like your people and they understand the product. And even if they're explaining it in like minutely different ways, they get why we're here and like what we're doing here. And I do think, I would agree with you. I think that is the due diligence of the hiring team, which again could come down to the founder, right? In these scenarios, a lot of times it's the founder doing all of these things. And I would just encourage, and this is similar for like marketing, when you find like that campaign that works or that messaging that like finally really feels right and really resonates, like these are golden nuggets, and the right people are also golden nuggets. And if it was super easy to find golden nuggets, the world would be more golden. But alas, it is not. And what was it? 100 years ago now, the gold rush in California, like that was hard work for people to find gold. So it is work, it's effort to find gold. But I think that comes back to like our intention in the space to like find gold so that can continue to glitter down the line.
So I have a tip for founders around this, is when, you know, you're, whether it's hiring, marketing, or I guess kind of anyone, I like to, because, you know, when founders are evaluating who to bring on, whether it's a consultant such as myself or an agency or even like a salesperson, I always tell founders, listen to the questions that they ask you. And if they don't ask any questions, that's a red flag, because they're not trying to get to know you or your business. They're trying to listen for revenue or opportunity for themselves. And at the end of the day, I would argue those aren't people that you would want to grow with, because if you're, you know, in the battlefield together and buddy's going to switch teams, maybe we don't want to work with them.
I like totally agree with this. And I remember like quite a long time ago, a friend of mine was just, I can't remember if they were looking for marketing or what, but I was like, well, if they should minimally ask you questions in this arena. If they're not asking questions in that arena, what are they doing here? Right?
And are they questioning you? So like, for example, founders will come to me and they say, hey, I want to run some ads. And I'm like, okay, great. Why? And they're like, well, we need more clients and we need more customers. I'm like, okay, what have you tried historically? And then we get into like all the other details. But, you know, if you were engaging with someone else, I'll say, they would say, okay, great, I can run those ads for you. And as a founder, you're like, well, we just met 5 minutes ago. Like, you don't really know me like that. You know, date before you marry, ask questions, and listen to the questions that they're asking you. Are they actually trying to get to know your business and help you, or are they trying to get a sale?
Yeah. And I think that is it's very common from a marketing perspective. I think also because, not because marketers are all devious creatures, but because some of them are, but marketing has become very highly segmented. And so there are people who are specialized in SEO, PR, email marketing, graphic design, right? The industry has become very, very siloed. And so there are people who want to just do their thing, right? They want to just do graphic design, and they don't actually want to help you understand what your brand is. They want to just take something that exists and turn it into beautiful imagery. And it's something that I actually promote with like marketing freelancers. Just be honest about, right? Like if what you want to do is create email funnels, that's great. But not everybody needs an email funnel. So don't just go out there and be like, you get an email funnel and you get an email funnel. And like it's actually bad for your reputation, because if you're selling those types of things to people who don't need them, they're not going to work. And then that looks bad on you. So just marketers, take it away from the founders for a second. Marketers, just stop it. Stop. I'm going to do the slap thing. Stop doing that. And then founders can trust that people are actually out to help them actually figure out what could work for them and what probably won't work for them.
Yeah. And one of the questions I had with a now client when they were kind of assessing me was, they said, if you had to, what parts of your job would you outsource? So it's a better way of asking what weaknesses are, because a lot of, like to your point, Tracy, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail. Right. So asking them what it is they're trying to nail in a creative way like that. Like, it's like, oh, what would you outsource, or what gets you really excited? And pay attention to when they get out of their seat to talk. And even those cues like that, or are they just like, yeah, I know you need marketing, right? No one
I can do all of it.
You need so much more gusto.
And I don't know, there's a couple people that I know that are watching who know me quite well, and I would love to hear what you guys think I would outsource, because I talk about it a lot on this show. So I'm just going to leave that for the crowd. I'll reveal it at the end. But again, I feel like people should know the answer. There's one thing I definitely outsource that has nothing to do with marketing, but there's also something that has to do with marketing that I would always outsource. Okay. We'll leave that for the audience. I want to come back to a couple of things that you touched on in kind of your interview process when you're asking people for information about the brand. Let's talk about product market fit, because I think pretty much every startup understands or knows that they have to prove product market fit. Right? It's on like the checklist of things that investors are looking for, product market fit. How do we actually confirm product market fit?
Great question. Love this question. Love talking about product market fit. So we do this through hypothesis testing. So I actually have a framework that I run not all of, I guess it depends on the client, but I run my clients through and say, okay, are you sure you know your product market fit? So what we do is I'll say, okay, and I run them through the framework, and then I write a list of assumptions, and then I write a list of hypotheses. So whatever initiative or task that I'm implementing for the marketing is if this, then that, right? If this turns out to be true, then absolutely, call your investors, we got product market fit. Great. But that's not always the case. And I also see a lot of misdiagnosis in product market fit. So is it like product market fit? Is it message market fit? Is it model market fit? Is it like, there's a whole bunch of different areas where there could be the gaps. So evaluating that, it's widely known as the product market fit umbrella, but there's a bunch of different things that reveal themselves kind of through the framework to say, oh no, maybe your model needs to change. Like I said, is it that self-purchase, or is it that book a demo, right? So like that's a model market fit, for example, right?
Okay, so any tips on what because like, I will be honest with you, my brain always says if you're selling stuff, you have product market fit. But I think sometimes we assume that there's product market fit without sales, and that we also assume we have product market fit when we have sales, and those things are not necessarily true. So can you demystify this a little bit more?
Are we pre-sales or during sales or post-sales? Which assumption are we working on right now?
Okay, so, well, Can we go through all of them? So let's assume we're pre-sales to begin with. We have not sold a thing yet. Can we say that we have product market fit if we haven't sold anything?
No. You can estimate market size. You can say, this is the market I'm hoping to capture. This is my target demographic. And then what I want to do then is narrow in on that ICP. And that comes through customer interviews. So the most underrated piece of advice that I always give founders is like, have you called a customer and asked how they're doing? Like, that's so much more valuable. Like, yes, like one of my areas of expertise is tracking all the clicks and understanding what they did and why they did it and when they did it and where they did it from and all the craziness of that. But I'm like, just call them and say, hey, how did it go? Right?
You'll get simple.
It seems so simple, but it's really a big deal. Mm-hmm. And honestly, maybe I'm biased because I'm a marketer, so I'll just note that. But if asked for feedback, I will always contribute because I know there's a marketer on the other end of that begging for this information.
This is why Kira and I are friends. Like, my husband laughs at me all the time because he's like, are you doing another survey? And I'm like, yes, I do all the surveys. If you ask me, and also because I'm curious to see like, how good are your survey questions?
Right.
And like, I analyze it from a marketing perspective too. I actually gave feedback when I was like going through my like prenatal checkups, like their surveys were so bad. And I actually said to them, I'm like, you guys need help with this? Because these are like completely, one, you've got people with like weird hormones trying to figure these out. And two, you've made these scales out to lunch, right? Like, how are people supposed how to give you useful information? They didn't take me up on it, but services, what are you going to do? But like, I mean, I feel like we need to do a whole rant show on how marketers don't have enough connection to the customer anymore. And if we just ask the customer what their experience was, we could learn a lot of things in like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
A lot more than like mining data for 3 days.
And just being upfront, right? Like if it's coming from a marketer just being like, hey, I do marketing for X brand. I see that you have engaged with their product. I would seriously love to hop on a call with you. I'll give you like a $50 Amazon gift card, something generic that everyone's going to use.
You'd be surprised how much people love $5 Starbucks gift cards, even though you can't even buy anything for $5 at Starbucks anymore.
Right? Yeah, like things like that. And just understanding from their perspective. Now, and this is something I always tell founders, when you're inside the jar, you can't read the label. So that's why like having an outsourced marketing can be really beneficial, because they can say, oh, this is what a customer is experiencing, and this is my experience in onboarding and trying to get to know your product. And I'm purposefully asking probing questions. Customers aren't going to do that.
Right. Okay, because when you were talking earlier about asking questions, this is the thing that a question I ask quite often is, who makes you think? Because there's a lot of things out there that people are telling you, right? People will tell you to do stuff, and especially in marketing, right? Like, post on social media once a day and have a 7-email welcome funnel. And like, there's a lot of things that people will tell you to do, but like, who makes you think? And if you don't have somebody in your corner, whether that's outsourced or insourced, right? Someone on your team who can do that, who is making you think? It's not just about telling you what to do. It's about thinking, hypothesizing, right? I love that I use the word hypothesis all the time. Like creative. We actually did a full episode, friends, on how to be a marketing scientist and focus on hypotheses. So if you're interested, let me know. I'll send you the link. But we're discovering there's a curiosity that exists. And if you find yourself being told too much and not asked enough, which is what Kira mentioned earlier, like maybe just red flag.
Red flag.
Yeah. All right, so let's go back to product market fit because we have a LinkedIn user who is asking about product market fit. So we're going to keep going there. So now let's assume we have sold something. How do we use that information, or what additional information do we need to confirm that we have product market fit?
So comparing what you thought was going to happen, your hypothesis, to what actually happened. So what channel was it from? Were they the ICP? And if they weren't the ICP, why? Right. So like, if I'm selling chocolate and then I'll do cookies. So Girl Scouts selling cookies is a completely different model than like Dad's cookies, right? Are they that far apart? Not really. Is their ICP the same? Yeah, kind of. But it's how it's delivered and who it came to. So why is it that this mom will buy Girl Scouts cookies every single time and walk past Dad's every single time, right? So like testing how they came to you and why, and then also how they used your product. Okay. So are these their company cookies that they give to like their kids' friends and everybody loves Girl Scouts? Or is it their sweet treat? And they actually just want a sweet treat. So maybe a Starbucks could come in and take that customer, right? Like think about, I mean, this is a very generic answer, but like the 7 Ps, how they came to you, and like answer all of those.
And I think this has got a big thumbs up from our LinkedIn user. LinkedIn user, if you would like to share your name so I can call you your actual name instead of LinkedIn user, that would also be cool. Because for whatever, LinkedIn is not showing me your name. But this is such a great example. And I think sometimes, product examples, I think sometimes don't feel like they don't translate into tech, right? So people are like, well, I have a tech product. It's not cookies, right? No one's walking by cookies. But this is a really great example because I'm thinking of my personal experience, right? I buy Girl Scout cookies and I buy Dad's goodie rings in particular because I'm pretty sure they have crack in them. But like, they're so good. But I buy those 2 types of cookies for different reasons. It's not, those cookies aren't actually competing against each other. Dad's cookies are competing against sweet treats. So I might get a Starbucks instead of Dad's cookies. But Girl Guide cookies for me are like how I support young girls, right? Like I contribute to the organization. It has nothing to do with the cookies. Actually, I very rarely eat the cookies. But I will buy both. And so these are the interesting things too, when you look at this from a tech stack perspective, because a lot of times in the tech arena, people will get very caught up in, well, we'll just keyword optimize the same words as our competitors, and then we'll be in the same faces. But if your competitors are buying Dad's cookies for a sweet treat and your people are buying Girl Guide cookies for the goodness of doing that, then you're actually targeting 2 different groups of people. And by like mirroring the strategy, it actually hurts you because it's not going to attract your clients. It's going to attract their clients, and their clients are probably going to choose them because you're selling Girl Scout cookies.
So, and then this all comes back to triggers, right? So there's 2 reasons people buy things, emotionally or logically. And typically it's a mix of both, right? So like logically, you were home when they bought the cookies, you had a $20 bill, whatever, right? But emotionally, that was an emotional purchase, right? The logistics had to line up. But like for dads, right, that's maybe more logistic. You're like, I need my crack fix. And I need to fulfill it. So
that's probably exactly what went through my head the last time I bought those. Just saying, I don't know. I didn't know people could read minds, but like marketers can. But this is the point, right? But also the value we're speaking to and like talking to your customers, right? Because a customer might not even be able to explain that in words on like a survey or something like that.
Yeah.
But in a conversation, especially with somebody who is naturally curious in the arena of marketing and learning about customer preferences, that like they could ask a question in that arena and reveal that type of thing. And this is something I say to people quite often, especially people who think that all of their clients don't have anything in common, because they do have something in common. We just haven't figured out what they have in common. And it might not be as easy as company size or industry or those types of things, which would we love to demographically segment based on, because it's easy from a digital advertising point of view. But very rarely is it that easy as saying like everybody in the cookie industry wants this product.
Yeah.
Maybe, but then that like tech guy bought it over there. Why did they buy it? Or I target this at salespeople, but it's actually a bunch of sales managers who have been buying it. Okay, well, like what do the salespeople and the sales managers have in common about their concerns or way of being or way of selling, or what is it that they have in common? Sorry, yeah, go.
And also outliers aren't always opportunities. So right. Sometimes you will just have outliers, right? So like, don't die on any hill.
And I think even like the world's biggest companies have outliers, right? So it's important not to, you're right. Like, it's not that we're out trying to fit everybody into a box. We can be like, oh, we can fit like 95% of people. And then there's this like these weird 2 outliers. Okay, fine. Those are outliers. Maybe they just like you as a person, or they're your cousin or something like that, right? But well, like, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, Kira. Like, what, because you've mentioned ICP. ICP, can you define that for us? Because I'm not sure everybody knows what it means. And also, like, how do we know what is our ICP and what's an outlier?
Ideal customer profile is what ICP stands for, so my apologies. How you define it is the easiest test that I do, and this is gonna sound really weird, but like, ask your mom. Does your mom know what your product is, and is she your audience? And if she doesn't get it, that's okay, but are you able to translate it to her at least, so that she can tell one of her little friends or whatever? But so like, finding your ICP is based on, you can do it a couple different ways, right? You can do it by just customer interviews, like going out into the ether and asking people. You can do it through research. So for example, unless you're Blue Ocean, you should be able to gather research on who fits your industry. So say, using like the Good Lawyer example, right? Like, we know who needs lawyers, right? So that industry isn't new. So dive into that industry, see what kind of exists in there, and then understand and then plus like add that with the early adopter curve. And then you'll find your initial advocates, your initial ICP, and then redo quizzing and asking. And then that will help you hone in kind of more and more and more.
Okay, so you mentioned this early adopter curve. I'm glad that you went there, because I feel like from a product market fit perspective, we might often be dealing with early adopters. So is there something important we need to take into consideration there, in that there is a specific personality of people who are early adopters, and then there are personalities of people who will never be the first mover to do anything? And so how does that translate then from the product market fit that we get from a early adopter cycle into that ongoing revenue engine, which will not just be early adopters?
So I would argue that it's more about using your early adopters and acknowledging them for what they are. They're early adopters, right? So they might not always be your product market fit. So for example, like, tech founders are primarily early adopters, right? But just because they bought your product, that doesn't mean they're in your niche, right? So like while you're testing out your pricing, you're testing out different things. Startups will want to try it because they're naturally early adopters, but they're not going to pay for it once it's, commonplace and you've figured out your subscription model and it's now $800 a month. Like then they're out. So your product market fit evolves as your company evolves and your stage evolves too.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle that is maybe a gap, is that people assume that we have people who bought this, so we have product market fit. And now as we evolve this and roll it out on a mass scale, those people will be the same people who want to upgrade and can continue to roll with that. So I feel like this is kind of ties into that idea about like kicking off with grant funding and then turning it into a revenue engine. What do we learn from those early adopters, from that product market fit, that we want to continue on influencing the cycle? And what are some of the things that would be a distraction if we try to like hold on to them so tight?
So typically this is where like product and marketing can be a little more intertwined. So it's like what we want to learn from those early adopters is what products actually, what features of that product make you actually use it, and which ones are the most valuable and which ones are you kind of like, yeah, I didn't really care, right? And then you're able to steer your product team, because you're probably around MVP at this stage, and like where you should focus your best energy with your product and your dev team, which is probably your biggest expense in your company. So steering them in the right direction. And then understanding why those features were driving it. So that's often where, you kind of run into a pivot, or it's to meet the market demand versus like staying steadfast on your idea. So that's kind of where we need to be a little bit careful. Like, don't just bend. You have to have your vision, but know what features drive it. And then that changes your marketing, because, obviously you want to market the features that people care about versus, if LinkedIn was just supposed to be a business chat forum, people probably wouldn't use it because Reddit exists, right? As an example. So figuring out what features and why is really important. So one of the messaging is a huge factor of LinkedIn for driving sales and all that stuff, but it's not the only thing, right? There's awareness, there's connections, there's all other sorts of things. So making sure your features align with what your ICP want at the stage of your company that you're at. So it's a big math equation, and all of them change at any given time.
And I think this is why, a knowledgeable marketer, especially even from a fractional perspective, right? Having them as part of the conversation is so valuable, because their specific purview is marketing. And there's a lot of people who get sucked into like quote unquote industry expertise, right? Sure, if you've worked in oil and gas for 20 years, you definitely have some knowledge about the oil and gas industry. But an oil and gas traditional company who is 100 years old, and the marketing that they do isn't the same as the marketing that a tech startup in the oil and gas industry needs in order to get them the opportunity to get to that version of marketing farther down. And so I think that the going into this conversation from a founder perspective, remembering that this is supposed to evolve, that there's not just like one right message and we're going to run that message into the ground for 20 years. Like, nobody has done that. Walmart didn't do that. Nike hasn't done that. Like all these Apple, Microsoft, right? Like, nobody has just like picked a thing and run it into the ground. They've picked a thing, they've gone a direction, they've pivoted, they're like, listen to the market, they've changed things, they've changed how they talk about it. And part of what makes these companies large and and sustainable and scalable is that they have that permission they've given themselves to evolve. They evolve to stay in the market instead of Blockbuster. We don't want people to be Blockbuster. We don't want you to be Blockbuster, people watching this show.
Unless you're a founder and you exited at the right time.
Well, but then that's also strategic, right? Like that's going into it knowing like, what do I want this to be about? Do I want Microsoft to just buy me and like have an out, right? Like this is
that
all
goes
about
back to
intention.
that Venn diagram that I was talking about, like the founder's vision, the market, and the offering. Right? It all has to work together.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is an important piece too. And like, tell me, because I mean, you talk to more startups than I do, but like the founder's vision, if the founder's vision is to create and get out, right? I've got like a 5-year turnaround time for this and I want to build it and I want to scale it and I want to get out in 5 years. That's a different play than saying, I want to be the next Apple. And how does that impact your marketing strategy?
I would argue that it impacts execution more than strategy, because you still need to grow in order to sell it. But executionally, what you need to do is you need to prove different theories to be true. So you need to prove customer lifetime value. You need to prove churn rate. You need to prove customer acquisition cost. And then you also need to prove that you have internal resources. So like, you would have to build out SOPs that explain every part of that. So if like the idea is if you want to get in and get out, you have to, what I call the bus factor, you have to have a high bus factor. So that's like if if anyone gets hit by a bus, it shouldn't necessarily matter, right? Like, because you're trying to prove that scalability and that growth. And then once you hit that curve, you got out, you made your money, excellent. But then no one's going to want to buy it. Like private equity isn't going to want to touch it with a 10-foot pole unless they know those metrics.
Right. Yeah. Well, and this is like, again, even just to call out some of the, like, I love that Kira keeps arguing with me on this. Not that we're actually arguing, but like we use these phrases like strategy, and we forget that there's things that are strategy and there's things that are execution and there's things that are tactics and there's things that are platforms and there's things that they're not all the same thing. And so it may or may not change your strategy, but it may change your execution or your tactics or your resourcing of those things. And so I think this is an important thing to pay attention to from a language perspective, because marketers are also will love to use lingo. Everybody in their own industry uses lingo, right? And marketers are we do it too. And we do things like ICP. And people are like, what is that? And so one, ask if you're a founder and someone is seemingly talking above your head, like ask them the question, like, what is that? Can you write that down? Because it also is probably helpful for you to understand like how they see it. Can they explain it to you? Is it helpful for you? Or are they just talking in jargon all over the place and you can't keep up? That's not the point. But also, you don't have to feel like you have to chase that, right? That you have people in your corner who can like, oh, sorry, ICP means this. This is what it means. This is how you create it. And then we get to move forward as an us. Okay, we are coming up on time, but I do want to quickly talk about demos. Demos as part of the marketing cycle, because again, I think with a lot of tech startups in particular, demos play a very big role in the marketing process / sales process. And so what are some of the things, Kira, that you see are gaps within how people use demos as part of marketing?
I've seen it used a couple different ways. So think about why you're offering a demo. Is it to get new customers because your product is too complex for them on their own, because then that might be a product thing. Is it to upsell? Great reason to do a demo, upsell, cross-sell, whatever it is. That's fine. But then you're pricing, but then that's a pricing thing, right? So, or is it just you thought it should be a demo because it's a tech product? Because can it just be a screen recording on your website and save you time, money, and effort? Let's try that route, right? Like there's different reasons behind demos. So I would ask yourself what your reason is.
I think this is a very important point, not just for demos, but for the marketing things that we do. Why are we doing the marketing things that we do? And I think, like, I see this all the time
Process.
Right. And like, what is it supposed to do for us? And I think it's the number one reason why people fail from a social media marketing perspective is that we think that the process of posting something is what's going to do it, but we don't know why we're posting. Like, why are you posting anything? Are you trying to start a conversation? Are you just trying to create a library of information, right? And again, then there's things that can come out of that. I get this all the time, people telling me they can optimize my YouTube channel for me. And I'm like, you're assuming I care about optimizing my YouTube channel. Because for me, YouTube is just a repository of my live shows that is easier to access than LinkedIn Live or Facebook Live or what have you. And I send people links. When I send people links, I send them to YouTube because then they can follow the show and blah, blah, blah. But I don't care. Optimizing that isn't relevant in my process. It's just over there. And when we know why we're doing a thing, why am I streaming to YouTube? I'm streaming to YouTube because I'm going to use it as a library. That's it. And then you can answer that and you can say yes to people or you can say no to people. And you can say this is how we use demos. There's not just one global way how everybody uses demos, but this is why we use demos and we know why we use demos. And so we can fill the rest of our marketing process if we have to around that, or we can even understand is this a sales activity? Is it a marketing activity? What is a demo? When does it happen? Do we only do custom demos? If we're doing generic demos, what's the value of a generic demo? Who is it for? Like you said, can we pre-record it and just have one there if it's generic anyway, instead of having a person that we pay to do that? And I guess for me, this just all comes back to the curiosity. And one of the things I love about startups is I do feel like they are more in the curiosity mode because they're fixing a problem. They've identified a problem in their market. They're trying to fix it. They're curious about how they can fix it. And so likewise, we can transition that curiosity into marketing and just remember that that's allowed. I guess that's it, right? You're allowed to ask marketing quote unquote experts questions. You should, yes.
Yeah,
not just allowed. You should ask all of them. And it's even one of the things when I talk to startups, one of the things I actually tell them to do is if you liked what we talked about here today, you should go and talk to some other marketing consultants, see what they're saying, see what they're asking, try it on to see if it fits your brand. Because if you can find a marketing consultant or a marketing employee that fits your brand, that's going to be way different than just checking the marketing boxes and doing the marketing things. And we talked about a lot of things you can do, right? You can do demos. You can post on social. You can create an ideal customer profile for which there are thousands of templates on the internet.
Yeah, you don't need to pay someone $10,000 for that.
Please don't.
Yeah, please don't.
And ask me, ask Kira, just pose the question, because one of the things that I love, I often tell my quote unquote LinkedIn friends that I'm your friendly neighborhood marketer. And if you have a question, you heard something and you're like, I don't know, this sounds weird or this sounds interesting, ask some buddy, ask me, ask Kira, and we'll probably ask you another question back. But it will allow you to figure out what are the things that are in alignment with you, what are the things that are not in alignment with you. And as a startup, you are in such a beautiful position to create the marketing program for you. You do not have to copy someone else's marketing program. There's a very small chance that that will work for you. But if you create your marketing program, that is the thing that will scale, that will sustain you to whatever your founder goals are going to be. There, rant over. Kira, any last thoughts or any gaps in our conversation that you wanted to make sure to address, that you often see with startups that you want to make sure people watch out for?
Something that I advise is like shop around and ask yourself why you're doing things. So there's a lot of, in startups, there's a lot of knee-jerk situations, which I totally understand. But think about the pressure you're able to take off yourself and what the value of that is. So do you really want to hire someone internally that is still figuring it out and they kind of have to learn on your dime? Or is it easier to just have someone to build it out in a sustainable way and then get an IRAP hire who doesn't have to figure a lot of stuff out? They just have to keep it rolling, right? Like, think about what your actual goal is and think about how it might change 3, 6, 9, 12 months from now. And don't be afraid to bargain, right? So like some people say, well, you know, is that your rate? Which my rate's actually cheaper than an in-house hire. And I say yes. And then if I can't justify it, or if you can't justify it, then it's not a fit, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. Right? So like, just think about how you want it to evolve and create markers that indicate or create timelines for markers so that you don't have to stress about it at night. You can be like, okay, I have my scheduled stress session at Friday at 11, and then I'll look and see how we're doing, right? Versus like, I had a bad dream, my marketing didn't work. And then you go and check and you're like, oh, it didn't work because I didn't check in on it. Or for example, right? Like, prioritize and try and protect your peace for founders, because there's not a lot of peace going around in the founder circle. It's a lot of coffee though.
So much coffee. Well, and on that, I would say, like, what an amazing resource for founders to have somebody who can make you think, but also somebody who can bring you that peace. Right? And I think this is one of the things. A lot of times we look at consulting resources and they charge more on an hourly rate, but they're also going to do much more in a smaller amount of hours. And so when you're comparing cost, it's really important to take that into consideration. I always say, like, especially before you hire a marketing like if you're going to hire a full-time marketer, you want to know what that resource is supposed to do for you. And they're not just supposed to post on social media and just do all of these things that are not revenue generating. They're supposed to be revenue generating. And so how do we know that this person is going to be revenue generating? We probably had a conversation about it.
It should not be a cost sink department. Now, it will be at times, but it should not be a cost sink department long term. So is it a cost sink in the sense of, like, you have to set up your foundation first before you can run ads and hopefully make money? Yes. But that said, if you're experiencing, like, and a good marketer will be able to say, here's why. It's because, and then it all comes back to the hypothesis. Like I said, it's like, maybe our assumptions were wrong, right? But then at least we're analyzing it and we're learning it and we're moving forward, and you will get success that way. And if it takes you more than like 4 months, you're not going to find it with that person.
Yeah. And this is Another thing that I think is important, because a lot of times people will tell you, right, especially if they're talking about brand awareness and building all of these things, right? Like, this takes years. And then this is just a way for like marketers to suck your money for years. There's a lot of big marketing agencies that are doing that, folks. And so this is the point. And this is what I tell people. I'm like, and I say 6 months, but if you're between 4 and 6 months haven't done anything,
Yeah.
like, it's not gonna do something. There's a lot of things, a lot of progress you can make in 4 to 6 months if you're intentionally doing that. And even if you have a like fractional marketing resource that's maintaining that intention, that can happen. And so taking that away, just remember, like, I love the why, right? The why, just like, why are we doing it? Why would we hire a marketing resource? Why do I think I don't know anything about marketing? There's many layers of whys that we can ask. But if we ask enough whys and we can discover people who make us think and give us peace from a marketing perspective, dude, we're winning.
Mhm.
All right, we totally went over, which is just what we do on
Sorry.
this show. Is what we do on this show. Kira, where is the best place for people to find you if they would like some more information, or they are a startup and they need some help?
Great question. Couple places. Number one, I'm probably in your incubator or accelerator. So if you want, hopefully for them to pay for me, then try there. Or you can visit my website, chasmconsulting.com. It's Chasm with a K. Obviously, I'm rocking Kira Kelsie, so we got to stay on brand with the K in Chasm, because I help you fill the gap in your marketing needs. That's my whole thing. And yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, Chasm Consulting, really anywhere. Kira Kelsie. Yeah, you can follow me anywhere. I'm just as approachable as Tracy. I have a little bit less swag than her headphones, but
she does have a pink background on her LinkedIn picture, so you can find that.
True.
Also, Kira is tagged in the post for this episode, so if you're trying to find her, you can just click on her name and get right over to her. Tell her, if you're reaching out to connect, tell her that you saw her on the show, so she knows a little bit about where you're coming from and what you might know. Always a little helpful. Although LinkedIn has decided it doesn't want to encourage people to send messages. It wants to. We're not friends on that right now. But love you, LinkedIn. But connect. And we also got, I'm not sure if LinkedIn user actually told me who they are, but we also have Omar and we have Gabe, who are here in the conversation. Connect with each other as well, because you are all interested in avoiding the marketing gap. So get into conversations with each other, right? Often I think, again, we don't give ourselves enough credit for knowing things. Just because you're not a certified marketer doesn't mean there's not experiences that you can share that can be helpful for people and encourage people to stay in the conversation. So, as always, I will say, if you are a startup or you're anybody who is experiencing some marketing gaps and you would not like to continue experiencing marketing gaps, please don't let this be the last conversation in this arena that you participate in. Reach out to me, reach out to Kira, reach out to some of the other people in the comments, continue the conversation, because the way we fill the gap or bridge the gap, maybe we should say, although recently there was bridge construction by my house, and instead of rebuilding the bridge, they just like filled the gap with dirt. And I was like, this is a way to do it too.
Lean, love a lean model.
Right? I mean, there wasn't anything there. I don't know if there was a river or something there before, but there's nothing there anymore. Anyway, they just filled it with dirt. So whether you're filling your gap with dirt or you're building bridge, just don't be like, there's a gap. It will always
Don't be a stranger.
No, come and chat. We would love to chat, and just share some ideas and ask you some questions, all of the questions. Kira, thank you so much for sharing all your expertise today. I hope people come and find you. It's always a pleasure having a conversation with you. And to everybody who joined us in the comments and not in the comments, And nobody guessed my thing. You guys don't know yet that I would I can't do graphic design. I would outsource graphic design. Just if you're not aware of that and you're a graphic designer and you want a marketing friend who has all the intentions of outsourcing graphic design, come and chat. We all have our strengths and we all have our not strengths. And it's important to know what yours are in order not to create additional marketing gaps. Okay, I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to do the sign off. And with that, friends, till next time, permission to do you.